good. All right. Honourable Mente, over to you. Time starts now.
Siyabulela, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. Now, my first question to the Minister would be, earlier on you indicated that 4 ministers were part of the panel that did interviews with DeRuyter. Were you one of those ministers, Minister? Yes.
Yes, the 4 were Minister Mantash, Minister Patel, Minister Didiza, and myself.
All right. What was distinguishing Mr. DeRuyter from the rest of the candidates that made him so special that he could be a capable CEO, given his history at NAMPAC, which could have been the best benchmark of his delivery in terms of working in such a utility?
Chair and Honourable Mente, remember that the process first went through the board. They had a long list, then they developed a short list, then they developed a shorter list, and then they sent 2 names to choose from, Mr. Kalitz and Mr. DeRuyter. I mean, I can't remember exactly how those interviews went, but at that stage, Mr. DeRuyter was, for example, the chair of the manufacturing circle. And I don't think NAMPAC featured at that time in the same way that it seems to be featuring now, even to the extent where he has to justify some of the things that have happened there. I haven't seen it myself, but I'm told it's in the so-called book. Not so-called, it's a book. But I'm not aware of the details. So clearly his background at Sasol, if I remember correctly, and his role in business and his ideas as they came through the manufacturing circle, and the fact that he managed engineers in various situations, possibly helped us to steer the choice in that direction. Thank you.
Minister, I don't think his experience in any of the other establishment you've mentioned were more than his tenure in NAMPAC, where he served since 2014 until 2019. And having found NAMPAC's share at the time at 37 Rand, and when he left it at 7 Rand. That could have been the best highlight, which should have directed the panel at the time and have a question mark or a red flag on his capacity to lead such a problematic, at the time, utility. But now my question then becomes, knowing what you know now, would you agree that everyone was involved in that process, including yourself, you committed a mistake and a horrible mistake for this country?
Firstly, I think he served in Sasol for about 20 years. That's what I can remember. Somebody can quickly check the CV, and so it's much longer than you might think it was. Secondly, interviews, what they are. They reflect what the individual presents to you at that particular point in time, together with whatever other information the board made available to us at that time. Thirdly, it could have been a very good choice, could have been a very bad choice, but you don't know how human beings are going to behave at a particular point in time. So what appears good at one stage might turn out to be terrible, or what you call horrible, if I got the word right, at another time. So, was it a mistake? Well, as we understood it then, it wasn't. Today, it's, if one has to be very polite, he's let himself down very badly. He's let the institution down very badly. And he's let this country down very badly. And that's a fact that everybody can see. And any attempt by smearing people on the outside in order that he could justify himself would, at the end of the day, come across very poorly if one takes an objective look at him. So I'll use a little bit more polite word, which is that he did some, as I pointed out earlier to Honorable Hadebe, he did good things within the organization, but ultimately the way he ended his term, I don't think did him any favors in terms of his reputation, except for those who think that here we have, and I'm going to extend your point if you don't mind, a whistleblower. He's not a whistleblower. He was the head of an institution. You don't blow a whistle to yourself unless you're whistling a tune. Then you can whistle whatever you like. But secondly, nor is he, as was described by Honorable Van Menen, a messenger. Then whom are you sending the message to? You're basically looking at the mirror and sending a message. So you actually, if you have the humility, you'll be able to get your own message. And thirdly, as I said earlier on, human beings have frailties, all of us do, however much we might want to pretend that we are perfect. And the best thing is to keep an element of humility in mind and as part of your DNA, so that you have the ability to reflect on mistakes, to correct mistakes, and do better the next time. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Minister, it doesn't matter how polite you can be. He was a horrible mistake. Turning out to be the person he is and gossiping about the entire country. Now, when he came in, he promised that in 18 months, we would see results as a country. And as Parliament, he would account, and he will also deal with the issues of corruption. Now begs the question, Minister, and the department, how was Mr. DeRuyter being assessed? Because the red flags of his failures, and in fact, now that we know he was busy with the book instead of running a utility, the red flags were there. 18 months, we were on a downward spiral, worse. Later on, Parliament went there. Let me speak about SCOPA. SCOPA, we went there, we came with 23 recommendations. That was 2019. 2020, when he came, he found 23 recommendations. 2021, we went back, nothing was done. 2022, we went back, found only 7 done. On the 7 was just administrative issues. But the issue of technical and procurement was not being dealt with. I think in some of the meetings that he appeared virtually, you joined us. And that was another red flag that the man is not going to deliver anything. How was he being assessed that you were satisfied DeRuyter is still a CEO that's fit for purpose?
So, firstly, in terms of the PFMA, the accounting authority is the board. Secondly, the way in which governance operates within our environment is one where the department has a shareholder compact, and that compact reflects what is expected of the board, and which the board must ensure that the management actually implements. And that compact would have reflected some of the things that you are talking about. We have 3 months after, or less than 3 months after his appointment, the pandemic, so you have to recognize that's a reality. And as I pointed out earlier, that it did interfere in a sense positively, but also negatively. Positively in the sense that we had a shutdown, which meant less energy was being utilized. Negatively in the sense that some of the maintenance work could only be done minimally, and that affected the extent to which.
Guys, can we please, Babusom, please. Minister, please proceed. Guys,
Anyway,
can
we'll
I
come
just
back to you, Honorable Sonia.
can I just? I know that.
Chair, please, my time.
Yes, there's the book may now, seek to derail us, right? Can we focus on these issues? I've got opinions about the book. They are vast and varied. I've read the thing, but it must not take center attention away from the core issues. So please, colleagues, the point has been exhausted. He wrote the book, we know.
No, but I'll come back to the book in a moment, because Honorable Mente talks about it. So to the extent that the EAF wasn't improving, is something we observed, it's something that we interacted about with both the board and the management, and that's what probably is being referred to as so-called micromanaging. That's when the tough questions were being asked. That's where, as I said earlier on, if Plan A is not working, why aren't you implementing Plan B? Or if parts of Plan A are working, but not adequately in terms of the timelines, just shift your attention elsewhere and do things differently so that you get better results than the ones that you currently have. So I think your question is a valid one. To write a book like this, whilst you're still supposed to be running a big organization, does raise some questions about what was your focus. In retrospect, clearly other people were running the organization. He was busy collecting, as some of you said, gossip during this period of time, and trying to add, either by himself or through his ghostwriter, descriptive labels for all the things that he wanted to comment on and all the people he wanted to comment on. In terms of your recommendations, 23 of them and only 7 done, we'll check that ourselves. I know there's been some follow-up from the department in this particular regard, together with other follow-ups that need to be made. And if there is this tardiness, and I think that, I'm not sure which meeting it was that ended in a bit of a conflict amongst yourselves. Was it SCOPA?
It was a SCOPA meeting in April, and it was a meeting around the 23,
okay.
April last day. It was around the 23 recommendation.
So we'll pursue that and try and just make a note, please, that we need to give some written response to that.
All right, so the assessment when you were meeting the board or whatever intervals you utilized to do a catch-up with the board in terms of all the SOEs that are under your ministry, they were also satisfactory to you? Whatever assessment that were given to you in terms of DeRuyter and his capabilities were satisfactory to you?
As I indicated earlier, and I'm indicating now as well, that a declining EAF can be satisfactory. An increasing level of load shedding cannot be satisfactory. But then you get involved in crisis management, and you say, well, which unit of which plant is in what status? If if there's an outage, how long is that outage? When it is going to return? How do we alleviate the load shedding situation in the country? And you begin to zoom in on that. I think if you are talking about it, why didn't you fire him? It's not part of my job, but eventually it would come to us as well. But we had to attend to what we saw in front of us and try and alleviate the situation as much as possible and mobilize the collective will of ESCOM engineers, power station managers, and power station operators so that they will work with us as the country and ensure that the right things are actually done at the various power stations. Some of it happened, some of it didn't happen.
Okay, here's another red flag which you made, you actually confirmed it to ourselves, that DeRuyter refused to be vetted. In particular, he refused to submit his financials. This is part of his contract. It's non-negotiable. Yet, you did not do anything about it. The man refused to submit his financials. How do you become a CEO running such a big utility where procurement processes are actually problematic at the time and are central to what is draining ESCOM as fiscus and what is destroying ESCOM? Were you comfortable with that? Why at that point not call him out or give him an ultimatum? You refuse to be vetted, you then leave the office, or you submit your financials to be scrutinized.
The relevant authorities, which includes both the board and SSA, actually have not submitted anything to us that I'm aware of as a department, which says we've been trying to vet this person, but we're not getting his cooperation. It would appear that there were several interactions, and only he can tell you how many they were, or SSA can tell you how many there were. So that's the one issue. The second issue is well known. There's a long queue on the vetting process in government, and not all of it happens as fast as one would like, even in an ordinary bureaucratic position. Thirdly, I mentioned the financials issue because that's what he told me. And any silence in that regard didn't mean approval of how he was conducting himself. But fourthly, perhaps we should have pursued this. I should have pursued it with the board, but I just left it to the board to continue to manage the situation. It might have fallen then between the cracks. But what I wanted to draw your attention to when I made the comment earlier on about his comment about submitting financials was, I know I'm part of a government institution, but not everything that government requires of me is something that I'm going to comply with. And that indicates a state of mind, if you like, in that instance.
Wilmenta, you can start rounding up.
Take a consideration of my time that was wasted.
I did.
Okay. Now, you spoke of international and companies, multinational companies, and even local companies that are embezzling funds out of ESCOM and all of that. One of those companies which were overpaid was ABB, out of the 4 companies that were overpaid by ESCOM. And this particular ABB was defended by DeRuyter. At the very same time, the very same DeRuyter refuses to disclose and submit his financials to the authorities. That was another red flag. I'm going to give you a couple of questions because the chair is threatening me. The disclosure of the donations made by BLSA because BLSA paid for this covert intelligence report. And she was on record in some media saying they paid 3 million to the whole amount. 18 million, sorry. She paid 18 million with BLSA. And to the covert intelligence report, meaning which this report did take place in ESCOM. There was intelligence being gathered in ESCOM. You are disowning it. The police were here wishy-washy about it and what was going to happen. Interesting question is, how was this item disclosed? Did the department pick up that item in the annual financial statements? If they did pick up that item, why was it not questioned? What was it paying for? If now we all say there was no intelligence report, even if it was not paid from the department, the donations, according to the Treasury regulations emanating from the PFMA, are clear that any donations made to the state must be disclosed in the annual financial statements. So did the department say that? Or if that's not the case, will you now take action in identifying these donations to ESCOM and see that all of them are disclosed and what were they being utilized for? You also made mention of a very concerning matter that as much as you wanted the board to give you answers and all of that, you also acknowledged the fact that the board was in a complex environment, which begs a question. We hire board members that have no knowledge or experience of the environment they are going in. And if that's the case, there is going to be many DeRuyters to come, because they are going to send them from pillar to post, learning from the very same thug that is going to tell them what suits them. And eventually, when they get to understand the ropes, they will see that a person is not fit for purpose. Now, the question is, can we change the way we hire the board members that are going to be the authority of ESCOM?
All right.
Now, lastly,
all right.
on Tutuka. Tutuka, Mpumalanga is a crime scene. Tutuka in particular commissioned a forensic investigation and paid for it to almost R1 million. That very same investigation was not implemented. It's not used anyway. And that investigation identified that raw tech, which fronted with black women, was actually behind the sabotages. And some of the items that you have mentioned of yellow plants and everything, that must be hired, whether the department can buy for itself or not. Thank you, Chair.